Hello everybody, I hope you can hear me and that it's been a week of a lot of reading for me at least, and I hope for you too. And I promise you that the last session was the most theoretical one, and that from now on we're gonna go deeper into more specific and more down-to-earth elements of human rights advocacy and its technological application. So, just to recap on the last week's topics, we covered the issue of human rights and its role in today's world, and we also covered the phenomenon of human rights advocacy, especially in the situation as it is today in today's world, that there are no fundamentally established mechanisms for defense and implementation of human rights, which means that the role of advocacy is still an important one in order to link the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations to the national and regional implementation of that. So we touched the advocacy as an effort that ranges from different activities like lobbying, campaigning, media campaigning, community organizing, etc., etc. And we also spent some time looking at the technology, especially from the point of view of human rights advocates, which see advocacy as a problem that needs to be solved in a more efficient way. So technology, and especially information technology, was important for us in that respect. So following on that, this week we're going to go into a more specific aspect which is titled storytelling. And storytelling is actually the effort of disseminating information to wider audiences for various reasons. The most important one is based on what we discussed last week, and that is that the shift of human rights advocates is in the last 10 to 20 years is from lobbying the institutions, either national or international institutions. The shift is now towards community organizing, and that means rallying a large number of people around the human rights advocacy effort, around the goals and around the policy changes that are required. So in order to rally these people around this goal, and in order to mobilize them, the information about the effort needs to be successfully passed on to these people. So here we are in the second session, talking about storytelling, or talking about disseminating information. We're going to go over the course of the next 7 weeks from the phenomenon of storytelling from a point of view of an individual towards the much larger effort of developing a campaign. As a result of this course, and as an exercise in this course, you will be developing a campaign plan. So I'll go deeper into that later, but what I want to say now is that telling the story as an individual and passing information as an individual is the important first step in this huge advocacy effort. So how are we going to approach this? First, telling the story of human rights and human rights issues is important, as I said, to rally the people around the cause. But more broadly, it is about disseminating information. And when we talk about disseminating information, we usually talk about the profession that has been doing it for a long time, and that's journalism. So let's spend a few minutes on discussing the stories that you guys submitted so far. We asked several questions about these stories. Why did they catch our attention? How did we discover them? And what impact did they have on us? And I submitted the responses to almost each. If I missed one or two, I will do it later. But I submitted most of the responses individually. But to kind of summarize, most of the stories came through one or many social networks or internet networks that we are tied into. So this is the overwhelming how shall I say, way we discover stories, and they catch our attention because they are somehow related to what we believe in or what we fight for or what we are frustrated with. So we have this personal connection through motivation to learn about these stories and through channels how we find these stories, and these are our personal connections or sites we like to visit, etc., etc. And the impact so far, as I gather, was various. You know, most of it was most of the impact that I gather so far is that it triggered more interest to learn more and to figure out more about the issue in question. So, in this little experiment, we actually looked at the information through from a point of view of somebody who is receiving that information. And this is going to be important for us later, because when we develop ways to pass information on, we will constantly go back and think about this from a point of view of somebody who is receiving information. How will it catch our attention? How will we discover the story? And what impact do we want this story to make? Later during the course, these are going to be the questions that we're going to ask ourselves, especially as we develop human rights campaigns. So let's go to the main question of this session, and that is, what is journalism? So, you know, I will now harvest 2 or 3 sentences, you know, or maybe one sentence from you guys, if you have any thoughts on what is journalism. I put on this slide a quote by George Orwell, who, this woman on the right, you can see she's carrying that sign with the quote by George Orwell, which says, "Journalism is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations." So this is a very, how shall I say, activist way of looking at journalism. It stresses the reason why journalists exist, and this is to reveal some information to the wider audience which has public relevance and which some people want to see hidden. But do you have any other thoughts what journalism might be, and what would be let's say a very short definition of journalism? Any thoughts? Okay, so if there it is. Here is the first one. It's spreading news, events from different point of view to a wide range of people. Exactly. This is the in essence what the definition of journalism would be. It's about disseminating information to a wide audience. Also, it's about events that are not easily accessible, which is what is called investigative journalism. This is one branch of journalism which tries to unravel things that are not easily seen by the public eye, and wants to expose that to a wider audience. Then let's look at some more. Journalism is about public issues happening in our society, saying the facts to the audience, and reveals things that are kept in hearts. And now we also have raised a question about what about privacy, and we're going to come back to that later, and we're going to be talking about that too. But you know, we practically touched upon the most important aspect of journalism, and this is the relation between information and the public. And the journalist would be a person who conveys that information to the public. Yes, and now we have another comment which says it's about influencing public mind through spreading information. And that is indeed a very good comment to go to the next slide, where I will be asking what is advocacy journalism. Because this is a course about human rights advocacy. And so we want to know, is there something like advocacy journalism? And I think that this comment, influencing the public mind through spreading information in a special way, is maybe the more something that more could be said about advocacy journalism. And although all journalism is like that, advocacy journalism is intentionally not objective. It intentionally wants to influence the public mind, and it does that transparently. So in other words, advocacy journalism is connected to an issue. It is something that it is connected to what advocacy group is fighting for. It is connected to an issue they're trying to address, but it is still journalism. So it is not objective, but it does so with an intention. It does so also openly, and tells the wider audience that they are the advocacy journalists tell the wider audience that they are supporting a specific issue. So we're now moving from journalism to advocacy journalism, and advocacy journalism as a tool of advocacy groups of spreading information is something that we're gonna focus on more closely. So unlike regular journalism, where the information is central, here the information itself is not central. The issue that the advocacy group is fighting for is central. So what does that mean? Should advocacy journalism be biased? So what do you think? Do you have any ideas? What about the advocacy journalists that are biased? Before you enter some comments, I'm gonna just explain the slide a little bit, because although advocacy journalists do have an agenda and they are fighting for a human rights issue, and they're trying to address this issue through the effort, advocacy journalism is still not propaganda, and advocacy journalists still need to keep their integrity as journalists, which means that they need to truthfully talk about the facts and talk about the stories, not to distort the truth, not to plant evidence or misread the reality around them, etc., etc. Because if you put the agenda over your integrity and think that by compromising integrity you're gonna continue pushing the agenda, in the end the agenda itself is going to suffer because of this integrity. As one of the comments just came in and said, basically everyone is biased, so though generally one should be unbiased in journalism, yet it seems inevitable. And that is certainly true. And this is why I come back to to the definition of advocacy journalism, it is not objective journalism, but it does so with intent, and it does so transparently. So it is important that advocacy journalists say that they are fighting for a particular issue. They are not pretending that they're unbiased. They openly say they're biased, but they still maintain their integrity by publishing and writing stories that are based in reality and that correspond to with facts. So this is important. Okay, we have advocacy journalism, another comment which says advocacy journalism should not be biased because journalism are supposed to advocate human rights. This is definitely the sort of bias that we're talking about. This doesn't mean again that the integrity should be jeopardized. It just means that you openly say that this is actually what the story is all about. Okay, so we touched upon the most important problem of advocacy journalism, and this is how to deal with the bias and how to deal with integrity of advocacy journalism. And integrity of advocacy journalists should go always before the agenda, but the agenda should always be fully disclosed. So we're going to go one step further now and talk about citizen journalism. And what do you think citizen journalism is? Here we have a cartoon depicting people with mobile phones who are filming a person who is drowning, which is a cartoon that tells a lot about maybe some moral issues with citizen journalism. But what can we say about citizen journalism? What do you think that citizen journalism is? Are there any comments on this? Okay, so this is not, it's journalism, it is not professional. Indeed, that is one of the most important elements of citizen journalism. Citizen journalist is a person who is not responsible for any rights. I didn't get that comment, but yes, these are people who have no idea of journalism. Indeed, that is true. Citizen journalists often don't know much about journalism. And yes, again, these are journalists who are not professionals. So we are going to talk about citizen journalism as a special form of advocacy journalism. Because citizens who engage in citizen journalism are not professional journalists, they are not trained as journalists, and they don't get paid for that. So the reason why they write stories, the reason why they make video and why they spread it online is not professional. The reason why they do it is because they believe in what they're sharing and what they're writing, and because they care about that. So that makes them advocacy journalists, because they are spreading the news because they care about the issue that they report on. So this is important to distinguish them from real journalists, paid professionals, but also to show that they do care about the issue. And this is why citizen journalists are advocacy journalists. So they are, as one of the comments here says, they are spreading information from the field using modern media. So yes, indeed, these are some of the characteristics of citizen journalism. First, citizen journalists don't have professional journalism training. And this is usually a problem, because a lot of citizen journalism out there is very difficult to follow. The blog posts, many of those blog posts are not written professionally. Many of the video that is out there is very, very unprofessionally done, and this is why it is actually very difficult for an ordinary viewer or ordinary reader to follow citizen journalists, most of them. But this is easily remedied, and the basic skills of journalism can actually easily be learned. So this is one thing that we are going to cover in this course. But nevertheless, citizen journalists don't have professional journalism training, and although they can acquire basic journalist skills, this is still the work of amateurs. The second important feature of our characteristic of citizen journalists is that they use modern technology tools, especially internet, and they use also mobile phones, cameras, video, audio equipment that goes in with these mobile phones, and they totally rely on the internet for the distribution of their news. So this is almost 99.9% of citizen journalism is connected to the internet. And we're talking about blogs, we're talking about video blogs, we're talking about different forms of disseminating information, but almost all of them are connected to the internet. So what do citizen journalists do? They create media, they augment media, meaning that they contribute to the already existing news stories that are published by others, and they add to that by augmenting, by sharing, by propagating them, and they also fact check the media. And this is especially important when when big media outlets started having comment sections where every news could be commented by readers, and this is where the reader could become a fact checker and actually point to some either inconsistencies or false information or whatever in these articles. So this is all happening online, and this is very important that this is tied to the Web 2.0 revolution that we talked about last week, that happened less than a decade ago. And citizen journalists usually work on their own. They sometimes collaborate with others, but it is important that when they do collaborate with others, unlike with professional journalism, here they do it on voluntary basis and not as part of any, let's say, company or professional association, and they can always go back and work on their own, which is something that regular journalists practically cannot do. They can work as freelance journalists, but they still have to work for some newspaper or a news agency. So citizen journalists can practically set up their own blog or start a YouTube channel, and they can go on and do that without any problems. But on the other hand, they don't get paid. So that is why the reason why they do this is because they are connected to the issue that they're talking about. So when we talk about quality and objectivity of journalism, citizen journalism, we are still talking about journalism. So it is important for citizen journalists to learn how to write news and news articles, how to make videos and how to edit those videos, and to learn basic skills of journalism, because this is going to help them and their stories reach a wider audience. And especially in a human rights advocacy effort for a small group of people to learn that is starting a human rights advocacy effort, even in one individual that is starting this effort, it is important to have these skills in order to reach the very next person that is going to join the effort. So citizen journalism can be biased. This is an important disclaimer. There is no need for citizen journalists to pretend that they are objective. As long as they're truthful and as long as this journalism is based on first-hand experience. So one of the biggest strengths of citizen journalism is that this is storytelling by citizens, not by professionals. And this is pretty much connected with their communities, with towns and cities where they live, and with the things that are happening to them. So as long as they're truthful, and as long as the experience that they share is a first-hand experience, citizen journalists should not be afraid of bias, because that bias is not just tolerated, but readily accepted by the reader. The reader expects that sort of bias and doesn't mind it. So we shouldn't be worried about that. Okay, so when we look at this definition of citizen journalism and compare it to like regular journalism, what would be some of the things that we would put as differences between mainstream media and alternative media, saying that citizen journalism is a form of alternative media? Are there any ideas? Getting paid and getting voluntary. Okay, so this is it. Wider equipment for mainstream. Professional and amateur. Okay, that is similar to paid and voluntary. Alternative is more first-hand experience. Which one is more accurate and more unbiased? We have a comment here. This one is more real-time. Professional is more accurate. The difference is analyzing news and showing what happened. So mainstream media has more analysis. That is true. The citizen journalism is more about first-hand experiences and more about real time, and they are right in the place at the right moment, while it is not predictable for a journalist to be there at the time of an event. This is also true for citizen journalists, that they are with the story, because most of the time they are the story. This is what citizen journalists are. They are people who are in the middle of the thing. Mainstream journalism is supported by government, and it is also in many cases money making. So it actually is supported by corporate interest as well, while alternative journalism makes no money. So let's see, one more. Mainstream is usually supported by the government. Mainstream is more liable. That is true, because you know who are these and yes, the bare news or oriented news, one would say that there is more bare news in mainstream journalism, because they are not so much oriented, although they do have orientation, and in citizen journalism there is more oriented news. Yes, the mainstream journalism can be offline, and citizen journalism is almost all online. That is true. Okay, so we covered a couple of important differences here. But although the mainstream media is more accurate and does offer more analysis and is more liable, it doesn't necessarily need to be so. And we can see that there are many examples of big mainstream media, especially government-controlled media, which are everything but accurate, everything but analytical, and everything but liable. And this is where one of the comments earlier said that that in some places the only way to get news is citizen journalism. and they're the biggest enemy of dictators. And this is certainly true in situations or in countries where the mainstream media is under tight control. The only way for disseminating information is actually citizen journalism. So now the question is, is citizen journalism really alternative journalism in these situations? And I will just quote one of the alternative journalists, Al Giordano, who likes to call himself authentic journalist rather than alternative journalist, because he says, and I quote, "I got very tired of being called an alternative journalist for so many years. Alternative to what? The New York Times? The dying Boston Globe? The Boston Herald? No, those people and their rags are the alternative to what real journalism is." And so what Al Giordano says here is certainly true in the situation where the mainstream media and mainstream journalism doesn't do what it is supposed to do. So alternative journalism then really becomes mainstream journalism. We have another comment which says, mainstream journalists should be neutral and alternative media can belong to a political party, but mainstream cannot. This is true, and this is again going back to what we said earlier, and that is advocacy journalism and citizen journalism as a form of advocacy journalism is allowed to be biased as long as you disclose that, and as long as you say it openly. That's not going to be a problem. The problem is where the state-run media, as in the case of for instance, Serbia, when we were fighting against Milosevic back in the 90s, we were all paying the subscription for the public television, but public television was actually just used by the ruling clique to disseminate their version of the story, which actually led the people to, some of them even dropped paying a subscription to the TV because it wasn't in the public interest anymore. However, they continued to do so despite all the protests and everything, because they were the tool of the regime. The problem back in the 90s was that the internet was in its infancy, and it was the stone age of the internet, so there was no room for alternative online media. So the only thing that existed as a real alternative, despite apart from some websites that were relatively static and that not many people had access to the internet, but the main alternative at the time was print media. With the print media, the problem is that it cannot be a one-man show. It needs to be a cooperative of a larger groups of people, and they need to know each other, and they need access to material resources, and they need access to the printing press, etc., etc. And that created a lot of risks and a lot of problems for the people who are trying to develop alternative media. Today, in the age of internet, some of these things are much easier. There are other problems, the problems of filtering, the problems of online security, etc., etc. But at least one problem is solved, and that is that today's citizen journalist can work on his own, which actually makes things easier to a certain extent, as long as he has access to technology and to the internet. And this is what brought an explosion of citizen journalism. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next slide, and actually the next two slides we're gonna look at some of the examples of citizen journalism. And according to many people, in 2009, the award of the best citizen journalism went to Iran. And Iran was considered the place where almost, we can say, citizen journalism, although it existed before, it was officially became, with the protest of 2009, it became the most important and widely discussed phenomenon in the world. So why did this happen in 2009, and how was this possible? What actually happened for citizen journalism to take such a prominent role in the events, not just in Iran but actually globally in 2009? Does anybody have an idea? And we can turn on the mic, and people who have thoughts on this can actually comment with audio.
I think what happened in Iran in 2009 was that so many media were shut down. The state TV did not talk about the events in the street, and neither the radio and newspapers. And the text messaging was shut down. The internet speed was very much slowed down. And all the official reporters of the foreign media were banned to take pictures in the street. No professional camera were allowed to be used in the street protests. So under such circumstances, people felt themselves responsible for reporting the events as they had happened. That's my point of view, why people cared this much about reporting everything themselves, since each person felt himself like being a medium, and that was exactly the slogan in the posters even. You are the medium, you feel yourself like a medium, and you are responsible for the spreading the news. And that is how things happened in Iran.
Okay, so yeah, practically this would be the reason behind the prominence of citizen journalism. Actually, citizen journalism filled a hole that existed in mainstream reporting. First, the television and news companies in Iran didn't report correctly, and then the same was the similar problem was with the foreign correspondents and foreign news agencies, which didn't have access, and so the citizen journalism filled both gaps, both for internal information dissemination within Iran and also for disseminating information abroad to a global audience. So the world learned about what's going on in Iran through the microphones, mobile phones, blogs, and videos of citizen journalists of Iran. So the most important ethical questions about can we check the facts, how do we report in real time when when news cannot be distinguished from rumors, how do we treat different aspects of reporting. All these ethical questions were actually raised at the time of 2009 protests in Iran, and most of these questions remain to this day. And we're gonna focus on some of these questions in the internet discussion on the forum later during this week, because these questions are important for citizen journalists to answer and to actually at least be aware of all these questions. But let's move to the next example that I had in mind. This is Alam Wasef from Egypt, and he's been interviewed in the video I actually assigned as one of the things that needed to be viewed before this class. And it's a 15-minute video if you seen this video, it's great. If you still haven't had a chance to see it, make sure you watch the video after this class. It's you can Google it on YouTube under the title "How We Did It When Media Could Not," and it says something about the larger role of citizen journalists before the revolution in Egypt, which happened last year. So I'm not gonna spend much time on this. Let's move to the questions about this particular session before we go into a more specific part of this class, which deals with how news are made. So, are there any questions? Okay, so I guess there are no questions about this. Let me just spend a few minutes just recapping what we covered so far. We covered the journalism as a way of disseminating information to wider audience, and within journalism we looked at advocacy journalism, which is disseminating information related to an advocacy issue to a wider audience with the aim of mobilizing that audience around this issue. And within that we looked at citizen journalism, which is a form of advocacy journalism which is unprofessional, which is connected to issues that citizens care about. And citizen journalism, although unprofessional and done by people who are not paid and who are not trained as journalists and who don't have the necessary resources to conduct real journalism, it became a very powerful tool, especially in the situation where real journalism doesn't work and where big media are either compromised or they're under tight control, and where there is an opening for citizen journalism to actually do what the job of old school mainstream media used to be. So, because there is no other way of learning about things that are happening in the country, the citizen journalists take the role of mainstream journalists. So this leads us to the most important problem of citizen journalism, which is never the problem of bias or the problem of commitment or motivation. It has always been the problem of quality. So the biggest problem of citizen journalism was always the problem of quality, and a lot of citizen journalists were producing stories and content which couldn't be read by or viewed by the readers or viewers. And as I said earlier, it is not that difficult to solve that problem, and actually the basic journalist skills are very easy to tackle. You cannot become a great journalist, but you can at least satisfy the basic standards which make stories more readable by the wider audience. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about the news style. And the news style, although we're going to talk about written news, similar logic applies to video and audio. And the reason why this particular news style is so popular is not because some people have preference towards it, or that some people think that this is more interesting than some other style, but because in the last few hundred years of the printed word, this was proven to be more effective with the reader. And the similar thing is with the video, and we're gonna talk about this later a little bit. But let's focus on the written news style. The written news style follows the following structure. Every news needs to have a headline, and this is the title. This is the big letters that explain what the news story is about. This title is followed by the lead, which is the lead paragraph, the first paragraph of the news. This is the opening 1 or 2 or 3 sentences of the news. And this lead needs to contain the most important essential information that the article carries. This lead, or the lead article, is followed by a so-called nutshell paragraph, or as somebody calls it, nut graph, just to make it shorter. And this nutshell paragraph actually explains the whole story in a nutshell, in several sentences, 5 or 6 sentences, and that is then followed by the story. And the story then can go into greater detail. It can talk about the historical significance, it can talk about the origins, it can talk about potential consequences, it can talk about what other people think about it, it can have tons and tons of analysis, but it is important that the most important information is in the lead, in the first paragraph, and that the story itself is condensed in the nutshell paragraph that follows it. Why is this news style so popular? Because you don't know when the reader is going to stop reading your story. This is not the Agatha Christie novel where you can read the whole novel and then when you come to the last page you will figure out who was the murderer in the book and which character is actually responsible for the crime in question. You know, here, unlike in Agatha Christie novels or some other detective novels, here you have to know who is the murderer in the first sentence. So this is important difference between regular storytelling and storytelling that is connected to journalism, including citizen journalism. Why is this important? Because people sometimes will read just the headline or just the headline and the first paragraph, and you don't know when you're going to lose their attention. So it is important for the most important information to be at the beginning of the article. So what needs to be in the lead, in the first paragraph? As I said, it has to tell the essence of the story, and the most important elements of the story need to be there. So in order to kind of put it in a more specific way, we say that the lead needs, the first paragraph called the lead, needs to answer the 5 W questions. And these 5 W questions are what, who, when, where, and why. So when we open the news, we need to see who did what, when, where, and why. And then the rest of the story follows. So I picked one of the news, it's from the Balkan region, and it happened yesterday. So this is the news by Al Jazeera, and news article by Al Jazeera, and in this news article we're gonna look at the to see where the article answers these questions. So you can actually circle the parts in the article where you think that the question what is being is being answered by the article. So what happened? where does the article answer the question, what happened? I'm going to read the article. The headline is called Serbia Talks Spark Mass Protests in Kosovo. And the first paragraph says, police in Kosovo have fired tear gas and arrested dozens of people during clashes with opposition activists demonstrating against the new push by the European Union to improve the country's ties with Serbia, etc., etc. So we have, we have answers. It sparks mass protest. Yeah, this is even the headline, and also the first paragraph says clashes with opposition activists demonstrating, which actually answers what is happening. There are demonstrations and mass protests. Okay, who? Now, where does the article answer the question, who made this news? Who this news is about? So this is actually an interesting question. What do you think? Opposition activists and police. So we have here, some people think that the who in this article is the police, and that who is actually relates to opposition activists. Well, this is how shall I say? It's about both. The information does. The information in the article does say that the police arrested people and that clashed with protesters, but the question about who organized the protests is the opposition activists. And yes, we can say that it's police and the demonstrators. So when we can, we cannot get this directly, but that's because I didn't put the date of the news, but sorry for that. Where we have, of course, yes, Monday's arrest. There it is in the second paragraph. And then we have where it says in the first sentence it's in Kosovo, and it's in the headline. And now we get to the question why. Why did this protest happen? Where does it say? Last paragraph, demonstrating against the new push by European Union. Exactly. This is why they are protesting. So we can see that almost everything, as one of the commentators said here, as one of the participants said here, almost all of the questions are answered in the first paragraph. What was happening? There were demonstrations. Who was demonstrating? Opposition activists. When? On Monday. Where? In Kosovo. And why? They were demonstrating against the new push by the European Union to improve the country's ties with Serbia. And it also answers here that it was followed by a meeting last week, which also answers to the question why. But we can say that almost all of the questions, or we can say all of the questions, are answered at the very beginning of the article. So what do we have later? Later in the article we have so-called nut graph or nutshell paragraph. It explains that there was a meeting last week between Kosovo's prime minister and the Serbian prime minister, and it was the first meeting at the level of prime ministers since the independence of Kosovo 4 years ago. Then it says what the EU position is, and then later it says what is the position of hardliners in Kosovo, and then that Serbia was bombed by NATO because of the killings of Albanians in Kosovo under Slobodan Milosevic, which was 12 years ago. So we get even the historical, in this news we even get the historical perspective and the reasons for all this that go back 12 years ago, but they are in the last paragraph. So as we can see, the most important questions here are answered at the very, very beginning of the article. So let's look at the same news, but by another. This was Al Jazeera, and now we're going to look at the news which was produced by another news agency, UPI, and here we will see how they answer these 5 questions. So I'm going to read the first few paragraphs, and then we're going to see how they answer these questions. Anti-Serbian protesters arrested in Kosovo. That's the headline. And then the first paragraph reads, nearly 24 ethnic Albanians were arrested Monday after violent demonstrations in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, officials said. Protesters threw rotten tomatoes and rocks at police, who in turn lobbed tear gas into the crowd of demonstrators, Serbian news agency Beta reported. An unknown number of people on both sides were injured. Demonstrators shouted anti-Serbian slogans and waved banners declaring unification with Albania instead of agreement with Serbia as they attempted to enter the Federal Assembly building. And Albin Kurti, the leader of the radical movement, was reported among the 22 people arrested, etc., etc. So, what happened here? Where do we read what was going on? So, if we go back, we see that in the headline it says that the protesters were arrested, which means, oh, there was a protest, and the police was arrested. And in the first paragraph it also says that people were arrested after violent demonstrations. But who? How does the article answer the question who? Where does it say who was arrested? So we can see here that the way the article answers the question who is rather misleading. In the headline, who is anti-Serbian protesters? In the first sentence, it's ethnic Albanians. Only in the third paragraph, it says Albin Kurti, the leader of the radical movement. Actually, only there you can find that this was actually the leader of an opposition in the Albanian parliament. So that means that who was organizing the protest? The opposition. You find that buried in the third article, in the third paragraph. So this is not actually a very good way of saying who is the main actor in this story. When? Okay, it's very, very easy. The first paragraph answers that this happened on Monday. And where? It also says it happened in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo. But let's look at the question why this happened. Where does this article answer the question why there were demonstrations? In the last paragraph. Yes. Only here we say that the protesters were angered by a Friday meeting in Brussels between Hashim Tači and Ivica Dačić. In the last paragraph. Before that, we learned that people were throwing rotten tomatoes, that police was throwing tear gas, and that they were shouting slogans and they waved banners declaring unification with Albania. So this is actually a story that is not correctly passing the information according to the journalistic standards. And we can ask ourselves why a professional news organization would do something like that, but we can compare this with the previous article, which we looked at, where everything is answered in the first paragraph or so, and that we actually can stop reading after the first paragraph and pretty much know what is going on. In the case of the second article, we can read the first 3 paragraphs, but if we don't read the last one, if we don't read the one that actually explains why this happened, if we don't read that one, we will never know the full story. Compare it to the previous article. In the last paragraph, we even get the historical perspective, and we also get the positions of the hardliners in Kosovo. So by the time we get to the fourth article, we already know a lot about what is going on in Kosovo in general, not just about the demonstrations. By the time we get to the fourth article, in the fourth paragraph in this article, we actually only then learn what is going on. So this is the example of bad journalism, UPI, and the article before is the example of good journalism, which is Al Jazeera. So to sum it up, the 5 W's is a tool that is going to help us put all the important information at the beginning of whatever we are writing. Is it a blog post? Is it a news article? Is it a video? Because in the video as well, the first minute or 2 of the video needs to answer these questions. Otherwise, you never know if the people are going to stay with you for, I don't know, 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, how long the video lasts. And if you cannot pass on that important information in the first minute or so, you never know if anybody is going to watch it. But in the news article, these 2 news articles that I've just shown, there is no reason for a citizen journalism not to be professional as the journalists of Al Jazeera who are responsible for the first article, and to avoid the unprofessional journalism that is represented here by the UPI article. So to sum it up, when we talk about news style, we're talking about inverted pyramid structure. The most important information goes on top, because you never know how much of the article people are going to read. Maybe they're going to read just the first few sentences and then they'll have to go and do something else. So the most important questions are answered in the lead. Who did what, when, where, and why? So these are the 5 questions, the 5 W's that the article answers in the first paragraph or so. Then this is followed by the nutshell paragraph that gives all the important stuff about the story, the stuff that we want the reader to know, that sums up the story, that gives the essence of the story, and then that is followed by minor details. Then we can talk about speculation, what may happen in the future, or historical origins of what how we came to this situation, or we can talk about what other people think about the issue that is in question, what are the reactions of different groups or individuals, etc., etc. But that is something that we leave for later. So inverted pyramid structure is actually something that is going to help us with disseminating information. This is also true not just for blog posts but also for emails, especially circular emails that you send to a large group of people, and we're going to talk about this later in the course. You never know. People are going to read just the subject of an email and 2 or 3 sentences at the beginning. You never know if they're going to read the whole email. So it is important to get all the important stuff at the very beginning. So another way to put this, the structure of the news story and about the issue, especially this is true for advocacy journalism, is that at the beginning the article needs to say, to answer the question what, and then to answer the question so what, and then in the end to answer the question now what. So the first focus of the article is what happened, and this means who, where, why, all these things that we covered in the lead. These questions need to be answered because people need to know what the story is about, what's going on, what is happening. This is what they need to find out first. The next question is, so what? Because they know what is going on, but what is the significance of this? Why should I care? And how does it relate to me? And this is where in the nutshell paragraph you actually are giving the essence of the story. In the example that we used, we know that what happened, there were demonstrations. So what? There were demonstrations. Well, the demonstrations were following the first meeting of the 2 prime ministers of Kosovo and Serbia in 12 years. So this is like an effort that was long in the making, and there is some opposition to it. So what? Now we need to know so what. And now the another important question for citizen journalism is now what? So what comes next? Why is this story important? What should I do about it? And in the professional journalism articles that we used as an example, it just says what they expect to happen. But in citizen journalism, another thing you can do is actually you can send an open invitation to the reader of the news how he or she can get involved by disseminating it further, the information, or by doing something to help the cause or something. So the style is also these 3 questions: what, so what, and now what, which actually relates to the inverted pyramid structure. We can actually put it here and say, in the first paragraph we're going to answer to what is going on, what is the news. In the nut graph we're going to talk about the important stuff, and we're going to explain why is this important. And for those people who continue to read and who get to the end of the article, that means that they are very much moved by the article, we can then give them even an open invitation to get involved as a part of the advocacy effort. So this is important, especially it's going to be important later during the course when we develop the campaign, because this is going to be an important part of the campaign. So now the bigger question is, are we going to bury some information and to hold the reader's attention to the end? And some people do that. And especially in the articles that are feature articles, that are not simple news stories, that are covering, let's say, profiling a person or covering an issue in a much longer form or something. People are withholding information to keep the reader interested. So the main question here is, what's the goal of this effort? Why would somebody do that? Why is somebody writing the story in question? What are you as a journalist, as a writer? What are you trying to sell? Are you trying to sell the story, or are you trying to sell your writing style? Because there are, especially professional journalists, who are selling their writing style. They're famous for a particular style, and the readers like that, and they're trying to sell that. And so this is pretty much connected to the question: are these people confident in the writing style that they have? So, in other words, it is important. Rules are there to be violated, but if they are violated for a reason. So if we decide to bury a piece of information for later, we better answer these questions. What's the goal, and what are we trying to accomplish? Because the last thing we want to do is to bury this information as a result of lack of experience and the lack of knowledge. If we want to do it, we're going to do it because it was a clear intention to do it, and it had a purpose. So this is important part of preparing the story. But in most cases, for 99% of any information dissemination that we're talking about, the simple rule is: do not bury the lead. Have these 5 W's answered at the very beginning of whatever you're writing. The blog post, the email, the video, the question who, what, where, when, and why. These 5 questions need to be answered at the very, very beginning of the article, because the reader needs to get that information at the very beginning. Because you don't know, I repeat, you don't know how long he's going to stay with you. You don't know if he's going to drop reading after the first paragraph. Okay, and this slide is a bit broken, sorry about that. So when we're talking about alternative media, coming back to that, we're talking about alternative information, not alternative style or alternative way of disseminating that information. Don't try to invent something that is outrageous, unknown to people, that was never tried before, because that is not going to be maybe understood by the readers. The main effort needs to be on alternative information, and this is, as a citizen journalist, you are actually providing people with information that they cannot access otherwise, and this is essential. It's not about making strange stylistic or any other experiments with your blogs or something that people cannot even read or do not understand. So a lot of confusion that exists in the online sphere is because of the people who are using alternative style instead of sticking to what is proven to be more effective. Okay, so let's move to a short discussion. We have maybe 10 more minutes for this, and so we can now cover anything that is connected to the news style or that is connected to the way information is organized within an article. And although I provided the 2 examples, and you can access them after the session, I will post both links to these stories so you can see them. How shall I say, the whole, because these are just excerpts. You can see the whole articles and see how the story is organized there. And you can also look at some other articles when you read the news and try to see if these articles are actually correspond to the news style that I talked about. And then you can actually go and look at some blog posts and see if the information that you can find in these alternative sources of media, if this information is also according to the so simple journalistic standards. So are there any questions? Okay, so the description of alternative media. The alternative media should be about alternative information, not about alternative style of representing that information. If you want to have a blog which is going to use some strange way of presenting information that will make people, which will make it impossible for people to understand what you're talking about, then you didn't do the right job. I think that a lot of it will be explained by the video Alam's interview in Egypt, where he actually used some pretty unusual way of presenting information through music videos. But even there, he made sure that the message is clear and understandable. And this is what is important about the alternative media. Alternative media is practically, when it comes to journalistic standards, should be the same as mainstream media. The alternative media should apply the same journalistic standards as the mainstream media. The difference is that the alternative media should do what the mainstream media does not want to do, because it's controlled by the government or because it doesn't have interest to cover certain things, etc., etc. So whatever the reason, we don't want to go into that. So are there any other questions about the news style? If there are no more questions, I will now go into we have a few more minutes, and I will go into the assignment for the next week. So I read the assignments that you sent so far about the stories that caught your attention, and you can use these issues, or you can pick a new one. It doesn't matter. You still have a chance to make up your mind about the issue that you're going to cover when we start developing the campaign. But so far, we're gonna, before we start developing the campaign, we're gonna now try to do something we learned in this class, and that is to write a short news story. Why do we want to do this? Even if we are not going to be writing stories as part of the human right advocacy effort, it is a very neat stylistic, how shall I say, it's a very important stylistic element of our correspondence, or the way we are communicating with other people, to put all the information, all the important information on top. And this is especially true when we're communicating with a big number and larger groups of people. So even if we're not going to be doing it, if somebody else is going to be doing it, it's a good exercise for us to condense the essence of the information at the very beginning. So well, we have a question here. So yeah, let's move to that question before I describe the assignment.
I say hello to everybody, and my question is that does it have to be totally original, the topic, like the short news that we are going to write, or can we get it from somewhere, like some other, like a mainstream media, or how should we just get it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is a great question. Yes, as we said earlier when we talked about journalism and citizen journalism especially, the fourth point here is that citizen journalists create, augment, or fact-check media, which means that not just that you need to produce media content on your own, which means write stories, go into the field and interview people. You can also use the existing news stories written by somebody else to promote the advocacy issue that is in question, because you care about it. And a lot of citizen media out there is actually what is called reblogging, which is blogging about something that somebody else wrote. And this is important to know, because the question here is not about, you know, making content, but it's about using the existing content as well within the advocacy effort. And I hope this answers your question. It's okay. So I'm gonna, because we're going to we're gonna end in 4 minutes, so I just wanna say a few words about the assignment. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna write a short news story that is covering a human rights issue, and it can be the same issue that you reported in the last assignment, or you can pick a new one. But the story should be very short, not more than 3 paragraphs, and approximately 250 words, not more than that. And it should be based on the inverted pyramid structure that we talked about, and also it should have the 5 W's in the story, especially mostly in the first paragraph. And you can also, if you wish, you can use the what, so what, now what approach, which we also discussed in the class. But what is important is that, you know, it can be the story that you already talked about in the previous class, or it can be a completely new one. Make sure that this is probably going to be the story or the issue that you're going to be developing the campaign around later in the course. So just make sure this isn't something very big or something that is, you know, not easily, how shall I say, narrowed down. But, you know, if you don't have something that is not focused, you know, we will still have time to correct that. So far, I think the most important thing now is to write the short story that is going to explain to me, as a reader who might read just the first paragraph and then move on to something else, what the issue is about. So I'll see you on the forum, and with this I think we are going to be finished with the second class in this series. Thank you very much.
بهره برداری امن از موبایل و اینترنت، زن، حقوق فردی و اجتماعی، سازوکارهای جلوگیری از نقض حقوق بشر، پویشی در مفهوم دموکراسی، مروری بر پایگیری نهادهای مدنی در ایران، اندیشه‌های نوین از حقوق کارگران، آموزش خبرنگاری، حقوق شهروندی امروز و محیط زیست. توانا رایگان توانایی ما را به سمت انسان امروزین جهانی متمدن تازه می کند. برای شرکت در این کلاس ها به توانا.org بروید و با جیمیل مستعار ثبت نام کنید. از طریق فیسبوک، توییتر و شبکه یوتیوب می توانید آموزشکده توانا را دنبال کنید. توانا آموزشکده است برای جامعه مدنی ایران.